Over the next couple of days, I am going to be doing a series of videos where we hone in on the key candidates and what we should expect to see from them in the debates. Now, some of you may be wondering, well, why would I be qualified to even have that conversation? So in high school, I was a debater. I was one of the best debaters in North Carolina. Some would argue that I was one of the best debaters in the country. It's debatable. Haha, see what I did right there. So I did it from freshman year to senior year, where in the middle of my freshman year, I actually went on to varsity debate in the middle of my freshman year. I got my butt kicked most of the time, but it was a very, good learning experience. And so by my sophomore year, it was highly competitive. We won a lot. And specifically, I competed in student Congress. In college at University of North Carolina, I was part of the American Parliamentary Debate Association. The second year whenever I was part of it, that was only the second year that UNC had been a part of it. And that was, it was mostly before that, and not even before, but even during. It was a very elitist organization. Some of you may be familiar with it. Ted Cruz was actually a part of it. And then it became super liberal, but I'll be honest with you, it was really neoliberal at the end of the day. It was still a great time. I learned a lot. My partner and I were the first undefeated team at my school. We did get beaten in the playoff, like in the playoff rounds, but we were undefeated pretty handily so during the regular preliminary rounds. And then my partner and I at the Princeton tournament were also almost undefeated. But we kind of got screwed in the last round, but we kicked ass there too. So, debate's something that I've been passionate about for quite some time. I like to think I'm pretty good at it. And that way, so now everybody knows why I felt like this was something important to do. So the first candidate we're going to talk about is Marianne Williamson. So Marianne Williamson is a very unique candidate. She has a very unique background. Her background is not necessarily political, but that doesn't mean that she can't be a good politician, if that makes sense. So her overall goal in this debate should really be linking herself to Bernie. As weird as that sounds, she should be providing coverage to Bernie. Why? Because at this very moment, there's a lot of emotional attachment connected to this election on the left and the right. But in this Democratic primary, a lot of people are passionate about what happened to Bernie in 2016. So they've stuck beside him to see him finish the race, finish this long race he did start in 2015, May. And to be honest with you, Marianne Williamson, because even though she did support Bernie in 2016, she doesn't really have an emotionally charged presence. There's no emotion associated with her. It's kind of, I don't want to say it's that people don't care about her, but it's an apathy connected with her campaign, even though she has a very empathic campaign. It does speak to a lot of important issues. So she has to show progressives and even some liberals that she is going to be on the right side of the issues, not only during the election, but after the election as well. That's really going to be key for her, because we've seen a lot of people, I'm not going to call no names, Elizabeth Warren, who during an election can say all the right things, but not make the key and necessary steps to put, the issues over the top, whether it be Medicare for all, whether it be agriculture, which is something that Marianne Williamson speaks to, whether it be election integrity, things like that. So that will be key for her, providing cover for Bernie, saying that your ideas are affordable, your ideas are necessary, and here are some of my ideas that coincide and even build upon the idea that you're already speaking to. If they try to attack Bernie from the left or the right, then it would behoove her to kind of break down. Like if they try to hit him with the socialist labels, it would behoove her to say, look, are we going to talk about labels in this debate, or are we going to talk about the issues? Because I believe in a lot of the same things that Bernie believes in, and I don't label myself anything. I mean, according to her website, she doesn't. So that would be great for her, because that way she can start getting people's attention as a progressive. She has a lot of people's attention as a humanist. That doesn't really help politically, though. She needs to start. She has to. I don't want to say she has to fall into a category, but at least initially, she has to be able, because that's how people are. They have to be able to categorize you to have a point to build from, and that would be good for her. So obviously, she aligns more with progressive beliefs. So that, and obviously, as everybody should know by now, like I said, Mike Gravel is the OG, triple OG of progressivism. Bernie is the godfather of progressivism. He's the OG of progressivism. And so that would be the best way to do it, to align herself with a lot of the ideas and provide cover for Bernie when he is being unduly attacked. It also would result in distancing herself from neoliberals, which is super important, because once you become an enemy of neoliberals, you almost become a friend of the progressives automatically by default. I don't know how it works like that, but it does. You know, in politics today, we can judge a lot from who your enemies are more than who your friends are a lot of the time. So that would be good for her, because at the end of the day, when you're speaking to the issues that she's speaking to, it's hard. It's hard to gain any traction with the neoliberals. But if you don't separate yourself clearly from the neoliberals, then people are going to be like, well, I don't know what she, especially because I've watched a few of her interviews. She has a habit of quoting some of the neoliberal talking points from the mainstream. And you can tell that a lot of the issues she speaks to are a lot of the things that she talks about are out of the mainstream. And she doesn't really have a lot of that independent media influence, which is something necessary for really any candidate to be successful in 2019. You have to at least be cognizant of what's going on in the independent media world. So the good news is that this is an election of outsiders. She is an outsider. That's great for her. So she's already separating herself in that regard. And I do think she should harp on that during this debate, and make a statement, because this is the 2019 debate. This isn't 2008. The person who wins the debate is the one who has the most viral soliloquy at the end of the day. So that's good for her. Unfortunately, it is her biggest strength and her biggest weakness. And I'll go into that, her outsider status. And I'll go into that a little bit more in a second. So key issues for Marianne Williamson. We'll start with the one that everybody knows about, reparations. She's the only candidate. Now, Tulsi Gabbard's the only other candidate who supports reparations. But right now, because she doesn't know enough about the issue, admittedly, she is for the study of reparations, so that whoever we get together and study and figure out what the best path forward for reparations is, that's what she'll go with. Marianne Williamson already has a plan out for reparations, and it's a pretty decent one. Invest $200 to $500 billion in reparations, paid over the course of 20 years. That's the most reasonable plan I've ever heard, and it's a really good one. I don't know how much that would mean for Black people. We're only 13% of the population, so it wouldn't be crazy. And I'm sure that if given the opportunity, she can go into detail about how, who will qualify and things like that. $500 billion is damn near nothing. Our military budget for 1 year, 700 billion plus, and it'll be probably 800 billion in between the next 8 years. So 500 billion is pretty reasonable. Another thing that actually sets her apart from a lot of other candidates is her child's rights, her stance on children's rights and child advocacy. She talks about trauma that children go through from a lack of nutrition. Talks about appropriate preventative care that children have not had access to. Talks about school supplies and what that looks like when you don't have adequate school supplies, because that actually does affect children. Anybody who, one of them, when your parents are poor and you don't have access to all the cool things that not only are they cool, like the Trapper Keeper, but they're necessary, right? It does affect children psychologically. It affects their ability to be productive in this academic environment. She also talks about literacy, which once again, she says specifically, like if a child is not learn how to read up to the standard that needs to be by 8 years old, then they will likely not graduate high school. That's what the stats say. So she talks about that on her website. So it's a very unique aspect of her campaign that a lot of other people don't share. I mean, children are the future, and I think that's something that a lot of parents would be able to emotionally connect to. So I think that that's something she should speak about a lot in this debate. And the reparations issue, because, I mean, she's not really going after the whole, you know how there's that crowd, oh my God, you're going to use my money to pay back black people. It's not my fault. Nobody really cared that Native Americans have been getting reparations. Not enough, if you ask me. They should be getting more. But nobody, because nobody said anything about it. It's never been made a big deal. Funny enough, as always, issues only become problematic and divisive when black people are being talked about. Isn't that awesome? Which is by design. But she needs black votes. She needs black voters. And as a white woman being the first one bold enough to come in to talk about that particular issue of reparations with a solid plan, that's a big boost for her. And she should talk about it. She's not going to get the same type of voters that Andrew Yang would get, but she does have potential to take black voters away from Yang, and Yang is actually doing pretty decently well with black voters who come into contact with him. So they're both outsiders, so that could be positive for her. She also talks about something that does not get discussed enough as well: food safety. Food safety is a big deal. She talks about the toxins in our food. She talks about pollution, how it affects our food. She talks about obesity. She talks about processing and more. Like, you should go to her website and check that out. That's something that a lot of Americans in the Midwest would love to hear about. A lot of farmers would love to hear about. A lot of the, I don't want to say liberals, but people like in New York, California, I guess liberals. A lot of liberals a lot of woke people feel like food in agriculture and the way our food is processed is not talked about enough. I agree. Also, something very unique. If she starts dropping some of the statistics that are listed on her website about our food supply, especially when they're talking about how it compares to Europe's food supply, how much healthier Europe's food is, the food that our kids are getting in school, things like that. That's something else very unique to her campaign that she does a very good job outlining on her website. By the way, her website, one of the best constructed websites in the race, really goes deep into a lot of issues, very similar to Andrew Yang's website. So I would urge you all to go check that out. She also talks about something. She has a whole section dedicated to Native American and Indigenous justice. Unfortunately, voting wise, doesn't help out a lot, but to the people who are woke, who care about these issues like myself, a lot of progressives, because that goes for people who are like reparations. Well, what about the natives? Yeah, well, nobody said the natives don't deserve reparations, and she agrees. So she's being ideologically consistent there. Love it. Something she should also talk about. The reason why, not necessarily because she's going to win votes from Native Americans. Yeah, that would be great. But it's more so to show that I'm consistent. I believe that we have a systemic issue where these groups of people have had to suffer so that this particular group of people could be elevated. And that's what history has shown us. Whether you're talking about redlining, the way that Native Americans have been treated on settlements, hell, look no further than Standing Rock. I believe that the Native Americans there should be paid additional reparations because of what the American government did to them, violating treaties. So what will she have to overcome? She'll have to overcome. So this is her pitch to show that people with political experience can be a part of this campaign without being part of the fringe, right? I don't know who's running her campaign. I don't know who her campaign manager is. I'm not going to pretend I know, but I do know this. She probably doesn't have a lot of people lining up because she's not a politician. She doesn't have that network. And so because of that, this is to show that she is a serious contender. This is to get people who otherwise may have been like, I don't know, but haven't really been hired either by the Bernie campaign, the Yang campaign, or the Tulsi campaign, other outsider candidates, to say, well, hey, maybe I should give Marianne Williamson a call and lend her some of the things I might have learned from Bernie's campaign in 2016, Jill Stein's campaign in 2016. Maybe if you worked for the Green Party or progressive organizations in the past, this, even a libertarian, I would say, would probably be okay with Marianne Williamson. She doesn't talk about a lot of redistribution of wealth outside of reparations and Native American reparations, which, once again, literally a drop in the bucket. No, it's the reparation she's asking for is nothing compared to the grand scheme of our federal budget. So she isn't really talking about a lot of wealth distribution. She's talking about proper wealth allocation, which I think is very important to understand. So I think even libertarians wouldn't mind working for her, but she has to show she's a serious candidate. And I think that this will be an opportunity for her to demonstrate that. Because she doesn't have a political network or background, she'll have to demonstrate that she has the knowledge to run a country. It's one thing to be able to speak to the issues. It's another thing to have the understanding and the discernment to figure out who's friend, who's foe. When you haven't been talking to these people like the best example I could think of, once again, Elizabeth Warren is very, very good at pretending like she is progressive. And she's not the only one. There are a lot of people who are good at that. Marianne Williamson, especially because, like I said, she's in her interview, she sounds like she listens to a lot of mainstream. She doesn't do the Trump derangement syndrome thing that often. But like, it shows that she's susceptible. Like it's kind of hard for her to tell who's a political ally. They can be friends outside of politics, but political allies are different. She has to demonstrate that she can discern who's a political ally, who is here for the movement and for her message, and who's an opportunist, who will take advantage of her and her lack of political experience for their own personal political agendas, because that's a possibility. And so that's what she's going to have to show. She's also going to have to demonstrate that she has at least a basic understanding of foreign policy. She is anti-war, firmly anti-war. And that's great. But it's easy to be anti-war from the outside. It's less easy to be anti-war from the inside when you think you're getting information that's legitimate. And as Tulsi is called out, and we found out time and time again from people like Julian Assange, Chelsea Manning, Edward Snowden, and others, a lot of times that information is legitimate, and you have to be able to logically, you have to be able to basically figure out if the information you're getting is coming from a credible source. Does that person have connections to Lockheed Martin, Boeing, or others? Do they have defense contractors that are throwing them money? These are things you have to know. I don't know how much Marianne Williamson knows about John Bolton, Mattis, Elliot Abrams, those type of people. And there's a long laundry list of them. She has to be able to know these things if she's going to be a president. So that's what she's going to have to overcome, to show that, yeah, I may not have the experience that some of these other people have in politics, but I can still run a country, not just speak to the issues that a country is having. What would a victory look like for Marianne Williamson? I'll be honest with you, I don't think she can win the presidency. But I do believe she absolutely deserves a place in a progressive administration. Department of Agriculture, she speaks to food a lot. Department of Education, she's, because that's something that also involves food for children. She talks about, like I said, the nutrition for children. Like, that's a big deal. I think she could be a spiritual advisor or just an advisor, a chief advisor in general. I think Tulsi would work great together. I think her and Bernie Sanders would work great together. I think her and Andrew Yang would work great together. And I think that would be a great victory for her to prove that my moral compass is stronger than 98% of the candidates running. And that I can tell you in a vacuum what the right thing, you can use all the facts and make the best decision based off of whatever, the circumstances. But I can, in a vacuum, I can tell you this is the morally right thing to do. This is how we would stay consistent with our values, with our ideology. And she seems like she's not going to waver from that based off of money thrown at her or opportunity, because Marianne Williamson already has her empire, really, before she became president. And it's an empire based off of empathy and connectivity between humans. And that's an amazing thing. And I think that we need more of that in the White House, in any administration. Another victory for her would be a 2 to 3 point jump in the polls to ensure that she ends up on the third debate stage. Because once again, she furthers the conversation. She pushes the conversation about reparations left, which is amazing. And it's something that needs to happen more often. I think that with her talking about reparations in a substantive way, it exposes those who are not speaking about it substantively. Elizabeth Warren, Julian Castro, who hasn't spoken about it since he got asked about it. He tried to use it to attack Bernie Sanders, right? Who's the other one? Cory Booker, even Kamala. Oh, actually, Kamala said it and then she backtracked. So it even pushes Bernie left on this issue. Like it when I say push it left, it's not a black or a white answer, no pun intended, but it's a substantive conversation that needs to be had. The Japanese got reparations. The Native Americans got reparations. Jewish people in the Holocaust got reparations. Even their family members after the Holocaust got reparations. Black people in America, very unique experience. You can go back from slavery, Jim Crow, et cetera, redlining up until the 90s. Then when we finally were able to have some type of ownership, gentrification, because we hadn't been able to build empires like the white male counterparts. And so reparations are past due. And that's the conversation I think Marianne Williamson can shift left and keep in the forefront, and puts a spotlight on candidates who are aiming for black votes. If you want black votes, and make no mistake about it, you need black votes to win. It's weird. We're only 13% of the population, but we can affect. They always say, you want to win an election, you better win over black women. And that's the truth. I don't know why it's the truth. Like mathematically, it doesn't make any sense, but the facts are the facts. So 2 to 3 point bump would put her in position to be in the third debate. She would still need 130,000 donations, but that 2 to 3 point bump could potentially come from black people, at least 1 or 2% of that, pushing that message and pushing her forward. So that would be another victory for her. If she is mentioned more with Bernie and Tulsi after that debate by aligning herself with Bernie, that would make it so that she will get more donations and be included in those fundraising money bombs Bernie, Tulsi, and Gravel get together. And it's, once again, if she could prove that she's a serious candidate, she may be able to win over some political strategists, some progressive political strategists, to help hone the message of her campaign, get her into more events like the Poor People's Conference. There's an ADOS conference that she's speaking at in Kentucky. Things like that. She wasn't at the California convention, at least not that I saw. That's not a good thing. Even if she wasn't speaking there, I feel like she should have been there. There was notably no presence of Marianne Williamson, even though she's from California. A progressive political strategist would never have let that happen, right? So that's important. So we'd love to know what your thoughts are about this. Leave a like in the comment below. Look out for our other debate analyses. We're going to do Andrew Yang, Tulsi Gabbard, Bernie Sanders, Cory Booker, Kamala Harris, Elizabeth Warren, and Joe Biden. I think that's it. Yeah, that's it, basically. Unless there's somebody else that you want me to do, you feel like it's necessary, list them in the comment section below. Other than that, always remember, more than anything else, find your balance. Peace. Thanks for watching that segment of Mi Casa es Su Casa. Make sure you follow us on Twitter, on Facebook, on Roku TV, and on JustNForm.com. Also, you can make sure that you're subscribed to the channel by going to the subscribe button, pressing it, and hitting that notification bell to get all of our notifications. And of course, you can help us reach our goal of 500 patrons on Patreon by supporting the show by donating as little as $1. You can click on the link in the description below for that. And remember, more than anything else, find your balance. Peace.